Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call the Grand Forks Regional Airport Authority meeting to order. Today is Thursday, April 22nd, 2021. And I guess the first thing today is just the approval and reading of the minutes. I'd like to get a motion.
I'll move. Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. And like to move on to the reports, financial report.
All right, good morning. I will do the March financial recap here through the first 3 months of the year. CARES Act dollars update, 2021 phase 2, nothing new from the prior months of this year. I am making a small request in April because we are required to make a request every so often, but you will see coming up in the agenda what will be happening with the CARES Act, which is why the request we're making is like $400. So it's very minimal at this time. All right, if we take a look at the employments, you're going to see that our forecasted employments were about 10,700. Our actuals were 14,700, 4,000 over what we forecasted. If you remember last year when we did the budget, we did everything very tight. Just we didn't want to overextend ourselves for anything. So you'll see as we go on here where those employments actually come from. With Delta, we stayed pretty close, within 500-600 passengers. But Allegiant, you're going to see, is where the big jump in passengers came, especially for March, although February had a nice increase as well. How that breaks out is Delta's landing stayed pretty close to what we had estimated Delta for. But Allegiant, we were forecasting 12 landings, and they actually ended up with 32 landings, more so because of their Mesa flight. And then they added in the Orlando. So some of those we were not forecasting, which is just fine. I'd rather be ahead of the game than behind. So if we look at our overall operating snapshot through the first 3 months of the year, we are negative $30,550. However, we had budgeted to be negative $324,000. We are sitting very good through the first 3 of the year. If we take a look at how that plans out for revenue, we're actually over on our revenue for expenditures. This was the first month that we're actually showing a positive result. So we're holding our own, actually almost $30,000 for March, which is nice to see. Revenue versus budget. Revenue, the solid gray line here is our budgeted numbers. So you're going to see it spike in April, and that's because that's when we're estimating our CARES Act reimbursement dollars. So this may change a little bit next month. But if we take a look at the 2021 revenue versus the 2020, happy to report that our revenue for this March compared to last March is ahead of where we were. And we all know that this March, I don't want to jinx anything, but we're coming out of the COVID. And last March, we were heading into it. So you're going to see when we start doing comparisons that 2021 is going to start looking a lot better than last year. If we break out the restaurant revenues, you're going to see that the restaurant revenues were almost met their budgeted dollars for March, and we're higher than February. And that goes back to the Allegiant travelers, all those ones that we did not forecast. So that was good to see. Car Car rentals were up $5,000 over last month as well, and up from January. So nice to see that their steady increase is coming back. If we look at the year-to-date breakdown by car rentals, that is shown here. And then the bottom right is overall the car rentals versus our budget versus where we were last year. So we're a little bit behind compared to last year, and we're under budget. But if the car rentals can continue to go on their upward swing, we should see that evening out fairly soon. The parking lot revenue, nice increase there from $33,000 last month to almost $57,000 this month. Like we said, being up 4,000 passengers over what we forecasted. It's nice to see that the parking lot following suit. If we just look by car count, if we look here on the far right by car count, we were only a couple hundred less car count-wise this March versus last March. So we all know the reason for that. So if we look at what's coming for April, last April we were at 846. So I'm hoping this April will be more up here. Fuel flowage, UND's fuel flowage has really come back. And that's because if you see some Facebook posts or hear in the news, you're hearing that Grand Forks has been the busiest airport 2, 3, 4 times a month. So that's the result of a lot of UND flying and a lot of the UND fuel as well. Half-life fuel is a little bit less than last year at this time. But overall, our fuel versus our budget is higher than last March and higher than our budgeted as well. There's just the fuel flowage that Aflight provides us, so we can see the flowage fees to Delta and Allegiant as well. We take a look at fuel flowage by Aflight. Last month they were down, oh sorry, I don't have the months up here. February they were down 35%, but March they made a bit of a comeback and they were only down 15%. Expenses versus budget, the solid blue line, like I said, is our budgeted dollars, and we were under budget. We touched a little bit on that last month. Some was, we're down because we had such a good snow season per se that our diesel costs, our vehicle maintenance costs, all of those costs were lower than expected. And then just to note, our legal fees will be coming in, and I haven't put those or used any estimate in this budget, so we have to figure putting those in as well. But have no concerns. We're still under budget, $143,000. Any questions or comments?
I've just got a couple questions. One is, as I'm doing more traveling a little bit in the last few months, I've noticed that car rentals throughout the country is very, very difficult to get car rentals. I know my wife's going to Austin, Texas this weekend, and you cannot get a car in Austin. You know, we actually worked some magic and ended up getting one through a corporate contact that we had. But if there's any update we could get from the car companies at all, maybe the next board meeting, I'd just love to hear kind of what they're seeing in the industry. And I don't know if it's lack of vehicles or just the explosion of, you know, more business. But I'd like to kind of make sure that at least our customers coming into Grand Forks, you know, have cars available.
So
I can actually respond to that. Maybe I think we had some discussion. There's actually been several meetings where this has been discussed, but maybe not in a board meeting. I can't recall now. But actually, at over the past several months, you're 100% correct that there is a nationwide shortage of rental cars for two primary reasons. When coronavirus came on, the rental car agencies across the country, and now we're talking parent companies now mainly, did not receive as much support as, say, the airlines did. They did receive, the payroll protection and some of those things, but they oftentimes sold off as much as 50% of their nationwide car rental fleet just to stay afloat. And now, as recovery has continued, especially in more leisure markets, spring break markets, southern markets, there is a dramatic shortage of rental cars. And because of the worldwide semiconductor shortage, the cars are not being, and just other logistical constraints, the cars are not being able to be produced quickly enough to where the rental cars can upgauge their number of vehicles in their fleet. So that's really what's happening. I can confirm also, though, that we're not seeing those shortages here in Grand Forks. Different management, different approaches here locally. And while some of the available stock may be down compared to pre-COVID times, there certainly are cars available. Literally in other locations, Arizona, Florida, etc., you literally cannot find a car. So that, I hope that answers your question there.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to make sure everybody's aware of too is kind of the Uber of catching a ride. There is a massive trend now. Turo, which is Turo, which is the ability to rent other people's vehicles. So, it might affect the way things in the future are going to look for the car rental industry. But anybody on this call could basically put their vehicle on this website, and you would just rent your vehicle to somebody in Grand Forks that would come in, and the person would pick you up, and you would take their vehicle for a couple days. And there's a process that you have to have with the cleanliness of your vehicle and stuff. But that is, when I was looking for a vehicle in Austin, Texas, that was the option that I was looking at. I mean, if you want a Porsche, or if you want a Mercedes, or if you want a BMW, it's all available there, high-end vehicles, and $100 a day, $80 a day. So just need to kind of be aware of that too for our business moving forward, where just like people didn't really understand Uber years ago, and it's going to change the car rental industry, I believe.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's something that's actually been on the scene now for a couple of years. Not all that prevalent here in our market, but you're right, it is there, and certainly got the attention of rental car agencies across the country, and airports as well.
Okay, that's the only questions I have. If anybody else has any other comments or questions for Cameron?
All right.
Great. We can move on to the director report.
All right. Very good. Good morning. I'm going to try to share my screen here. All right. Hopefully everybody can see that there. So late last month, I participated in a Mead and Hunt Air Service Development Conference. It was all done virtually, so over about 3 days. Those in attendance were able to hear reports from very good selection of airlines from across the country. And this here was the overall industry update, and I thought it did an excellent job of giving some kind of state of the industry, where we've been, and where we think some of this where we might be going. So I thought I would go through this quickly, and certainly stop me if you have any questions. Just kind of looking back, we've been talking about 2020, But when you look at some graphs and charts, I think they tell the story quite well. When you look going all the way back to 1980, some of those boxed areas show various recessions over the years. You see 9/11 noted, swine flu, and you see the dramatic impact of COVID-19. It essentially wiped out 40 years worth of traffic growth in the United States. And with COVID, we saw dramatic capacity changes. Now, these are all nationwide stats here, but I think, again, it shows the impact. March was pretty much half of a month last year where we saw the impact and then the dramatic decline, and then April, May, June, down as much as 70% capacity last yeit. Then you see the flattening, if you will. We talked in July, August, September, and even through the fall, how it seemed to be, there was some recovery, but it was stalled out a little bit, I would say. But here more recently in March and April, you see now again some additional recovery going on, and that's certainly being noticed right now across the country. When looking at various regions of the world, domestic travel, again, this is by seat capacity, down by 44% in the United States in 2020, or actually, we're the second half of 2020 compared to 2019. But you see other portions, we talk about international travel being way down, and then interestingly, Canada travel, down 92%. U.S. to Canada, obviously with the border, that certainly is an impact, and other quarantine type rules having an impact there. The Canadian market has had a much more difficult go, and I think an interesting side note, airports and airlines in Canada have not received little, if any, support to this point from their government compared to what we have seen here in the United States. So it's going to be another very interesting thing to watch as the recovery continues. This here is by airline. And of note here, Allegiant has actually, from a seat capacity standpoint, they have continued by the most of any of these airlines here shown domestically to continue to fly more seats in the markets than any other airline. Only down 6% seat capacity. That was interesting to note. You see Delta, United, American, all roughly in the 40% down in 2020 seat capacity. And this is primarily because, especially with the recovery, I know we've discussed this numerous times now, but the recovery really has been in the leisure market. Business travel and international travel continues to be significantly down. And so those that wanted to get away somewhere to beaches and mountains and national parks, those sorts of leisure destinations have been the ones that have actually done well, and actually in some cases have seen significant growth. Load factors, similarly, for 2020, you can see your ultra low-cost carriers, or ULCCs like Spirit, Frontier, doing a little better on that end of the spectrum than some of the larger carriers. Airline fare trends, as you would expect, were down. This is the third quarter average, and you can see that Delta and United were down about 24 and 33% compared to the U.S. average of 36%. Allegiant and some of the ULCCs were more dramatically having to reduce fares in order to get people to fly. Interesting slide here. We talk about airline profitability And from 2013 to 2019 was the strongest run ever for the airline industry. High profitability. There had been some consolidations prior to that, and a relatively, especially the later years there where the profits got much higher, lower fuel costs were certainly a part of that as well. But you see in 2020, they saw over $100 billion drop in revenue and ultimately a $35 billion loss for 2020. It's industry financial reporting season. We'll be touching on Delta's reporting here too, but that's occurring right now as well. Skip over this one. The fleet trends by aircraft size. This is also something to note, and it's particularly important for the Grand Forks market. It's been discussed for numerous years now that there was supposed to be a gradual transition away from the 50-seat regional jets. Back in the days of higher fuel costs, they were just not as efficient. But from 2015 on, as fuel became a little less expensive, you saw the 50-seaters continue to serve a role in markets. However, now, again, there is additional pressure on the 50-seat aircraft. Not a significant change from 2019 to 2020. However, just note that the dark blue there, which is the 51 to 100-seat aircraft, have grown from being 8% of all departures to 25%. And that's significant. And what we're hearing and what was loud and clear during some of these airline reports is that we will, nationwide, but also here in the Grand Forks market over time, continue to see more of the 76-seat aircraft, primarily with Delta now I'm referencing, and less of the 50-seat. And so that will be something to monitor. That generally is a good thing for the Grand Forks market because you do see a first-class option on those 76-seat aircraft, a little more space for baggage and such. But also the most important thing to watch is how many flights per day will we have, because we want to keep at least as many seats as we've had historically. And so that will be the item to monitor going forward. Major fleet restructuring. Delta cut more than 220 aircraft in 2020. They eliminated 6 fleet types and others as well. That was an ongoing moving away from older, less efficient aircraft and eventually replacing with newer models. This here is speaking to the share of network carriers, Southwest, versus the ultra low-cost carriers, or ULCCs. You see, going back to 2000, the ULCCs, again, like Allegiant, Frontier, Spirit, were only 2% of the share of the market. They have continued to grow to the point where now they're up to 14% of the market. And that has created more competition, especially in markets that have multiple ULCCs. And so that'll be also a thing of note going forward. The trend is for that to continue to grow. I'm going to skip over this one here. Recovery in progress. You can see here, these are the TSA passenger throughputs. We've been talking about those going back. This goes back to around the time of COVID coming on in late March. The red line are the daily TSA numbers. And again, here in March especially, you start to see that more significant increase. And so this is a continuing positive sign, we believe, for the industry and especially for the leisure market. Just a couple of important bullet points. We know what COVID has done. They're saying, though, it will take 2 to 3 years minimum to fully recover. That's been a pretty consistent theme that we've heard from multiple sources. Still wonder about business traffic. Will ever recover to pre-pandemic levels? That will be an interesting thing to watch. There's a lot of different schools of thought there. I'm not sure that we're ready to weigh in one way or the other there, but that will be something that everybody's watching. And then the surge of leisure-driven demand. Once people feel safe and as the vaccines continue to be rolled out, there is a sense that there's a lot of pent-up demand, not only for leisure, potentially for business, but certainly for leisure. And that's already happening to some extent. So the recovery is definitely in full swing, we would say. So that was a very short, condensed version of 3 days worth of slides, but I thought it was appropriate, and I thought it would also help to give a little background information. Any questions or comments about any of that information? All right, hearing none, just a couple of other airline items and other items of note for the moment. As I mentioned, Delta did release their first quarter earnings report, and there was an article in the Wall Street Journal. I'm just going to read a few quotes from it. I thought they were pertinent. Delta reports another quarterly loss, but says travel demand is rising. Domestic leisure bookings are increasing, but many international markets remain closed. Delta signaled the worst of the coronavirus pandemic is likely behind it, as the airline anticipates that travel demand will continue to gain steam in the coming months. Delta's brighter outlook came as it reported a net loss of $1.2 billion for the first quarter on Thursday, its fifth straight quarter of losses, but said its operation began generating cash again last month for the first time in a year, and passenger revenue that month jumped 50% from February. Airlines are hoping that travel will roar back to life this summer, and the recent rise in bookings is the latest sign that the rebound they have long been hoping for might materialize, with domestic leisure bookings at 85% of pre-pandemic levels. Delta says it is on track to potentially turn a profit this summer. A couple more quotes. Delta expects revenue to drop as much as 55% in the second quarter from pre-pandemic levels. Many international markets remain closed, and business travelers have been slow to return. CEO Ed Bastian said demand from corporate travelers remains at roughly 20% of normal levels, though he expects companies to start sending people back out on the road as employees are vaccinated and offices reopen. For now, though, airlines, including Delta, are preparing to fly vacationers to beaches and national parks and to visit friends and family for the first time in months. So that seems to coincide almost exactly with the information that was being presented during the conference that I attended last month. Also of note, Delta announced that effective May 1st, they'll be going to 100% capacity on all of their flights. They have been at 75% capacity, and they're also going to be removing the middle seat restriction. We don't have any middle seats here on Delta in our market. However, removing the middle seat restriction system-wide will allow for more seats to be available going forward. So again, positive news there. So that was a brief airline report. A couple of other items of note. We are monitoring the discussion on the infrastructure bill that's being proposed by the Biden administration, is now being deliberated by primarily the House in DC. Lots of different reports on this, but at present it's an approximate $2 trillion plus bill, and apparently earmarks and or what some others might call congressionally directed spending are alive and well with this bill. Representatives from the House have reached out to their constituents to ask for projects as part of this bill. I have been in contact with Representative Armstrong's office, as well as Senator Hoeven and Senator Kramer's offices, to provide them the information on our upcoming projects, and we'll continue to work with them and monitor the progress on any potential infrastructure bill. On the UND apron front, I know it's been reported now for the last couple of months with what was occurring in the North Dakota legislative process. The House in North Dakota State now passed an amendment version of the bill that will need to be resolved in a conference committee between the House and the Senate. Both Senator Holmberg and Representative Mock have been appointed to the conference committee, and so they are well aware of the projects and of the need. The Senate side of the bill, the interesting difference here, the Senate side of the bill is both the bills are that were passed are $5 million. So that is the number that was needed for the project. But on the Senate side, the funds come from the State Strategic Investment and Improvements Fund, or SIF fund, to be administered by the North Dakota Aeronautics Commission directly to the Airport Authority. On the House bill, again, it was $5 million, but these were federal dollars that were going to be administered to UND through the State Board of Higher Education. Either way, we believe that either avenue will be able to successfully complete the project. And we also believe at this present time that they will have this successfully resolved through the conference committee. And it's good to know that Senator Holmberg is involved in that conference committee, because he has been the champion of trying to move this forward. So that's what we know at this point, and we'll continue to monitor that as well. Any questions on those items? Okay, hearing none. Very brief update on the NPN study. There was a meeting, I think I reported on this last month, and then some follow-up. There's two main items that are being looked at and or resolved. There was building consensus on exactly the items that were going to be modeled and tested. There was some additional corridors that were added relative to the UND helicopter operations. That was brought up in discussion that had not been previously contemplated in the study. So there were some corridors that were developed, and those are looking to be added to be evaluated as well for any impact to those, as well as a document was produced to send to the regional FAA administrator with some questions regarding some information that they had provided regarding the NPN plant. I believe Mr. Schauer is on the line. I don't know if you had anything to add there.
No, right now, just real quick, the future plan is we will have a letter out to the FAA administrator tomorrow with those questions, and also a summary of our analysis process for their input. We're not anticipating a lot of input on the process, but we're hoping they will answer. There's 6 questions that came out of the key stakeholders that we do anticipate they would respond to. And that's it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Schauer. A land acquisition update. Initial offer letters, or what were called letters of just compensation, were delivered last week to the landowners by Mr. Dittis. They are now given a reasonable time to respond to those offers. On the Grand Forks City property, a City Council Committee of the Whole, as well as the full City Council this past Monday, granted approval of the land transfer of approximately 32 acres of city property to the Airport Authority at no cost for the land. The only cost will be any fees associated with that transfer. So that was positive news there. That is moving forward. We do have the agenda item for land acquisition negotiation strategy later on the agenda, and we're planning to go into executive session for that. So we'll give further update or further information on those negotiations in that session. And then finally, I'd just like to note in the audience here, we have our RFOP supervisor, Joey Castiglione. He is an Air National Guard member, and he's actually going to be going on a deployment. I'm not sure how much specifics I can provide, but he's going on a deployment to another continent, let's just say that, and we'll be gone for about approximately 10 months. And so we have been coordinating with Joey and staff on schedules and some adjustments there to make sure that we can do what we need to do and accomplish in Joey's absence. But wanted to bring it up because we wish Joey well, and he's certainly an important part of our team, and we'll have his position waiting for him when he comes back, obviously. But just wanted to publicly note that and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Ryan.
Those were all the items I had for the director's report.
Perfect. Thank you. We will move on to new business. First item is the Mead and Hunt Task Order number 3 amendment.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. In your packet, we have task order number 3 with Mead and Hunt. The original task order number 3 was approved at our February Airport Authority Board meeting, and that was to complete an engineering report that will lead to the design of our extended runway and taxiway, as well as the partial relocation of County Road 5. At the time that the task order 3 was approved, it included completing runway and taxiway pavement cores and soil borings. However, soil borings for the partial relocation of County Road 5 were not included, as the final alignment had not yet been determined. After some further coordination with the Grand Forks County engineer and the alignment was resolved, we are able to move forward, and we were able to move forward actually with the necessary soil borings. We had perfect conditions in late March. The ground was mostly froze. It was very dry. Of course, there's no crops. So the landowners did grant us access to complete those soil borings, and that was accomplished successfully without disturbing their property. There was a slight additional fee for the soil borings. The initial borings on the runway and taxiway and some of the runway cores came in well under budget because that was coordinated successfully, and the subcontractor was able to complete it more quickly than originally anticipated. So the actual increase here is not much. The total cost increase is $4,955 to absorb these additional borings for County Road 5. That cost is eligible for 100% FAA funding as part of our 2021 FAA grant. So the recommendation is a motion to approve amendment number 1 to the Mead and Hunt Task Order number 3 in the amount of $4,955 and authorize the executive director to execute the required documents.
I so moved.
I would second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. We will move on to new business number 2, resolution number 0101-21.
Thank you. Since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, there have been several federal legislative enactments to assist airports, as we've discussed. We've had the CARES Act, the CRRSA Act, the American Rescue Plan Act, and we did go through all of those in great detail at our March 15th board work session. After reviewing all the options and restrictions on the utilization of the various airport grant funds, we're recommending a change from the use of CARES funds to the use of CRRSA funds for reimbursement of our future operational expenses. And they're for a few primary reasons. The CARES Act funds are less restricted. They can be used for any purpose an airport can use airport revenues on, including strategic capital development projects. CRRSA funds can only be used to reimburse for operational expenses and other items specifically related to COVID-19. CRRSA funds can also only be used for development if it's used for combating the spread of pathogens at an airport. So that is a limitation compared to CARES Act. An example of using CRRSA funds for something like that would be if we needed to transition to touchless bathroom fixtures or filter upgrades or so on. And fortunately, with our relatively newer and more advanced terminal building and RFOPS building and such, we're not in a need to having to necessarily do that now. And we also anticipate that the American Rescue Plan funds will be restricted similar to the CRRSA funds. So given all of that and the key differences between those types of funds, we are recommending the use of CRRSA and or American Recovery Rescue Plan funds, for the future reimbursement of operational expenses and the use of CARES funds for strategic capital development projects at the airport. The Airport Authority Board previously authorized up to $1.15 million in CARES funding to cover the 2021 operational expenses as part of the 2021 budget approval. We've attached resolution number 1-21 to formalize and approve this transition from CARES to CRRSA funding for reimbursement of the 2021 operational expenses. Recommendation then is a motion to approve the transition from CARES funds to CRRSA funds for reimbursement of the 2021 operational expenses and to adopt resolution 01-21. I can read the resolution if you would like. I'm not sure if that's recommended, Mr. Attorney, but either way, it is in your packet. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
All right, we have a motion. Anybody?
This is Cindy. I'll move approval.
This is Jeannie. I'll second.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So we will move on to resolution 2-21.
All right, thank you. Resolution number 2-21 is to authorize to utilize CARES Act grant funding for new equipment. The CARES Act was signed March 27, 2020. It was a $2.2 trillion bill and provided $10 billion for our nation's airports, and of that, $18,855,574 was allocated to GFK. To date, we have utilized $4,751,062.72 to keep our 2020 and 2021 financials whole, complete pavement maintenance, and pay off and or defease all airport bond debt. This leaves a remaining balance of $14,104,511.28 that must be utilized within a 4-year period of performance from the date of grant execution, which means a deadline of June 10th of 2024. At our Airport Authority Board work session conducted on March 15th, airport staff presented a recommended CARES Act funding plan to best utilize the remaining grant funds, meet our strategic objectives, and complete high-value projects and initiatives that we would not be able to otherwise for many years. This plan includes the list there: new equipment for airport fire maintenance and snow removal, a new U.S. Customs building, new T-hangers for the East General Aviation Complex, new passenger terminal generator, demolition of obsolete facilities, and architectural and engineering services to support these projects. Airport staff and our Mead and Hunt consulting team are continuing to work on refining the scope of these projects. We continue to believe all the projects are eligible and will fit within the funds remaining. and we recommend proceeding now with those projects that are ready to advance. We've identified a need to purchase several new pieces of equipment to replace older equipment that's beyond its useful life, increase operational efficiency and safety, and prepare for the additional pavement that will be added as part of the airfield development program. Acquiring this equipment now, when reimbursement funding is available, will also enhance the self-sustainability of the airport. The proposed pieces of new equipment are listed there. We have a new 1,500-gallon airport rescue firefighting vehicle, that should be a 300-gallon rapid intervention vehicle. That was a change we actually were looking at as part of the development of the spec. And so that would be a slight amendment there, 300-gallon rather than 500-gallon rapid intervention vehicle. That's being proposed primarily because for alerts revolving around smaller aircraft, we currently respond with the large 1,500-gallon vehicle, which is additional wear and tear. The vast majority of the number of alerts that we have are UND or smaller aircraft related. And so to have a more maneuverable piece of equipment to be able to respond there would make some good sense. And in some cases, we can also still respond with the 1,500-gallon truck if needed, depending upon the nature of the emergency. Also listed there, we have an AFFF foam test cart. We discussed that at length in the board work session, but that helps us to assist with our annual foam testing that we need to accomplish in a safer and more environmentally friendly way. We're proposing also a new runway snow blower to replace two older blowers that are 1980 and 1981 vintage, a new combi plow broom to replace the 1986 grader, a new articulating wheel loader to replace the 1997 loader, and a new airfield painter striper to add capacity and efficiency. The estimated total cost of these pieces of new equipment are $3,835,000. We're recommending that the Airport Authority Board authorize the use of up to $4 million of CARES Act grant funds to reimburse the Airport Authority for these equipment purchases. All specifications for the equipment have been prepared in-house by airport staff, and the equipment to be purchased will be advertised for bids. All bids will be brought back to the Airport Authority Board for review and approval. It's anticipated that there will be an approximate 1-year lead time for some of the equipment to be manufactured from the date of the bid award. All equipment being replaced will be sold as surplus at the time the new equipment is placed in service. And so we have an attached resolution which is recommended for the use of these funds. And the motion is to authorize utilizing, or the recommendation, I should say, is a motion to authorize utilizing up to $4 million of GFK's allotted CARES Act grant funding to reimburse the Airport Authority for the purchase of new equipment as detailed above, and to adopt resolution number 2-21.
I'll move.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion, any questions? The only question I would have is, are all these items, they go out for bid, or what is the process of awarding the product?
Yes, so the specs for all of these pieces of equipment have been prepared. They're in draft form, and we are fine-tuning those right now, but they are essentially very close to being able to be advertised. They will be advertised for approximately 3 weeks for bids. We will bring those bids back, and it's our intent to bring those back to the full Airport Authority Board, potentially even next month, for award, and then proceed in that fashion, if that answers your question.
Yeah, and I know our business right now with large equipment, we might not even be able to get even Kubota tractors this year because they're completely out. are we going to run into availability issues? And does that change our spending, or do we have to spend it by a certain time if they can't deliver the product?
Yes. So we did reach out to some of the vendors, potential companies that we believe would be bidding on these items. At present, they are about a year, in some cases a little over a year out. That's actually not unusual for especially some of these larger, more complex pieces of equipment, but you're absolutely correct that there are some logistical demands right now on this type of equipment. So that was the other reason for us wanting to move forward with it now. We do believe that, you know, it could be a little longer than a year, potentially a year and a half for some of these to arrive, but certainly at present, we believe they would be able to be completed within the remaining 3 years of our period of performance.
Perfect. Great. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item, we've got the Mead and Hunt task order number 1, Charlie.
Yes, thank you, sir. Airport staff has identified a new customs building as a high priority project for possible use of CARES Act grant funding. The new customs office, the current customs office is located in the old administration building. That building is slated for future demolition. In addition, the current customs office location is not efficient for users. A new location closer to the AvFlight hangar would be more convenient, and that's the way it's shown in our approved airport master plan. To advance a new customs building will require extensive coordination and planning with U.S. Customs. These buildings are a turnkey operation and include all furniture, computer equipment, etc. They are built, they are constructed, they are provided to Customs. Customs walks in the door and they are able to function day one. It's recommended that we begin this process with the preliminary design phase, which will include programming, coordination, and fine-tuning of the budget for the project. Mead and Hunt has prepared the attached task order number 1C for preliminary design of the new customs building. You'll note that we're adding the C to any task order for Mead and Hunt that is relative to CARES Act grant funding. And that's the way it'll be an internal protocol for us, but it'll be something to note as well that anything with a C, we're intending to fund with CARES Act grant funding. The amount of this preliminary design is $98,152. This would be an eligible expense as part of the CARES Act grant funding project. This type of project does require the approval of a development addendum by the FAA in order to utilize CARES Act grant funding. The FAA has advised us that a development addendum would be awarded at the time we receive bids for the overall project. Therefore, we are not recommending an Airport Authority Board resolution to authorize CARES Act grant funding for the project at this time. We will plan to return for further board approval when the scope and budget for the project is determined. And the scope of services was included in the packet. And so, recommendation is a motion to approve Mead and Hunt task order number 1C to proceed with preliminary design of a new customs building and authorize the executive director to execute the required documents.
I'd move.
Second.
Any discussion, any questions on this topic?
Brian, I didn't see it in the packet, but what is the proposed location? Is it approximate or?
Yeah, so good question. The master plan shows a preferred location actually between the terminal building and the AvFlight building, adjacent to the south end of the Alpha apron. Now that's, if you look over there right now, you've got in that vicinity, you've got the parking lot for AvFlight's hangar and for that FBO operation. and then you've got also our employee lot in that vicinity. So that would require some adjustment, modification, and that's part of this preliminary design to see if that site that was contemplated as part of the master plan as a preferred site will actually work now as we get into some of those discussions with customs. So that's the preferred site, but I guess yet to be determined if it actually fully plays out to be the best location.
Sure. I mean, I think functionality, inbound aircraft, that's the perfect spot for it. So
Right. And so that's where we would prefer that it go.
Isn't there deep drainage in that area too?
Drainage would need to be considered as well as part of that. I'm not sure that I would say deep drainage. There's a couple of
It seems to me there's some fairly deep retention ponds or something that.
It doesn't need to be there. It was just graded that way.
Oh, so you'd have to adjust that.
It could be filled in and pushed off to the west.
Okay.
Okay, any further questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. So the next item on the agenda is the land acquisition negotiations related to the planned extension of runway 9 left and 27 right and taxiway Bravo and the associated relocation of County Road 5. This item may be discussed in an executive session. The legal authority for closing this portion of the meeting is North Dakota Century Code Section 44-04-19.1, Subdivision 9 and 2. Topic or purpose of this executive session is to discuss, number one is to discuss the negotiating strategy and to provide negotiating instructions to our attorneys and or other negotiations in the attempt to reach amicable agreements with the affected landowners for the acquisition of their property and attorney consultation. At this time, a motion would be in order to discuss the next topic in executive session rather than an open meeting. Is there such a motion?
This is Cindy. I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion, any questions on this? I'll call the roll. Commissioner Muchler?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Bolenberg, and this is just a roll call to make sure everybody's present and have documentation, correct? So Commissioner Bolenberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Mock?
Yes.
Commissioner Simonson?
Yes.
And Commissioner Peach?
Yes.
And Chairman Mellon is not with us today. So the motion has carried. The executive session will be recorded, and all members of the governing body are reminded to limit their discussion during the executive session to the announced topic.